August 13th, 2026, a courtroom in Los Angeles County. Not a big story that day, not the kind of hearing that makes headlines on its own, just a motion on a docket, one of probably a dozen the judge would hear that morning. Brian Hickerson was asking a judge to make his past disappear, not literally erase it, legally clean it up. Take 2 felony convictions, both for injuring a spouse or girlfriend, and downgrade them to misdemeanors. Then expunge them. Wipe the record. He'd tried this exact same request once before, back in July of 2025. Denied then too, but he tried again. Judge Olivia Rosales said no. The prosecution had opposed the motion. And whatever their reasoning was, I don't have the transcript. I don't have access to what was argued in that room. The outcome is what matters here. The felony convictions stayed exactly as they were. On the books. Official, 2 counts of injuring a spouse or girlfriend, tied directly to Hayden Panettiere. 3 days later, she was dead. I need to slow down here, because I think it would be really easy to hear that sequence. Denied on the 13th, dead on the 16th, and immediately jump somewhere I'm not comfortable jumping. So, let me be precise about what I'm actually telling you, and what I'm not. I am not telling you a judge's ruling caused Hayden Panettiere's death. I don't believe that, and there's no evidence connecting those 2 things directly. What I am telling you is that 3 days before she died, the legal system took one more formal, documented look at Brian Hickerson's history of violence against her, and decided, again, that it wasn't something that should be cleaned off his record. That's not speculation. That's a matter of public court record, confirmed by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office to multiple outlets, and I think that timing deserves more attention than it's gotten. Let's go back, because to understand what that August 13th hearing actually meant, you need to understand what it was reviewing. A history that goes back almost the entire length of their relationship. They got together in 2018, not long after Hayden split from her ex-fiancé, the boxer Vladimir Klitschko, with whom she shares her daughter, Kaya. February 2019, Jackson, Wyoming. Hickerson was arrested, domestic battery, interference with a peace officer. According to the sheriff's office, deputies responded to a disturbance at a private residence around 2:30 in the morning. A caller had said an intoxicated man was locked outside after punching his girlfriend. Reports at the time said he'd hit her, Hayden, with a closed fist on the right side of her face. He pleaded not guilty. That case, the Wyoming one, was eventually dismissed. Prosecutors said they couldn't secure a material witness. I want to pause on that phrase for a second. Couldn't secure a material witness. In a domestic violence case, that phrase almost always means one thing. The victim either couldn't or wouldn't testify. And I'm not saying that to blame Hayden for anything. Anyone who's studied domestic violence knows exactly how common that is, and exactly how many reasons there are for it. Fear, love, financial dependence, hope that things will change, shame, 100 other things that outsiders rarely understand and have no right to judge. So the Wyoming case went away, but the relationship didn't. July 2020, Los Angeles this time. Hayden filed for a restraining order against him, an out-of-state order registered in California where she was living. Around the same time, she posted something on Instagram. I'm not going to quote long passages of it to you because I want to respect the line between telling you what happened and just reading someone's most painful words back to them for views. But she said, in her own words, that she was coming forward with the truth about what had happened to her, hoping it would help other people in abusive relationships find the courage to get help. She said she was prepared to do her part to make sure this man never hurt anyone else. That's not me interpreting her feelings. That's what she wrote publicly in July of 2020. Then, later that same year, this is the part that gets left out of a lot of the coverage because it's uglier and messier than a simple restraining order story. Hickerson was accused of sending Hayden threatening text messages after his arrest. Messages that reportedly talked about going, in his words, to war, and threatened to release embarrassing information about her if she didn't drop the charges against him. Threatening to release information about her if she didn't drop charges. That's witness intimidation in plain language, and it was actually one of the original counts he was charged with in the criminal case that followed. Here's where the case really takes shape. In 2021, Los Angeles prosecutors brought an 8-count criminal case against him. 8 counts, covering a string of alleged incidents between May of 2019 and January of 2020. The charges, as they were originally filed, reportedly included things like battery, assault with a deadly weapon, and intimidating a witness, on top of the injuring a spouse counts. He ultimately pleaded no contest, not guilty, but not contesting the charges either, which carries the same legal weight as a conviction, to 2 of those 8 counts. 2 felony counts of injuring a spouse or girlfriend. The other 6 were dismissed as part of the plea deal. I think that's worth sitting with for a second too. 6 other counts, including assault with a deadly weapon and witness intimidation, existed on paper at some point in this case. They didn't result in convictions. Plea deals work that way constantly, for all kinds of practical and legal reasons that have nothing to do with whether the underlying conduct happened. I'm not telling you those 6 counts are proof of anything beyond what he was actually convicted of. I'm telling you they were part of the record at one point, because I think leaving that detail out entirely would be its own kind of dishonesty. He was sentenced in 2022, 45 days in county jail. He served 33, with credit for time already served. 4 years of formal probation, 52 mandatory domestic violence classes, a 5-year restraining order, 4 years of probation, 52 classes designed specifically to address the exact behavior that had already, by that point, generated a Wyoming arrest, a California restraining order, and an 8-count felony case. And here's the thing that I keep turning over in my head, more than almost any other detail in this entire story. After all of that, the classes, the probation, the jail time, Hayden Panettiere and Brian Hickerson got back together. On and off, according to multiple reports, right up until the week she died. That's not a scandalous secret I'm revealing to you. It's been publicly reported, repeatedly, by outlets that covered their relationship for years. And it's also, painfully, achingly, one of the most well-documented patterns in domestic violence research. Survivors going back, not because they're naive, not because they don't understand the danger, for reasons that are complicated and human and almost never make sense from the outside looking in. So that brings us back to August 13th, 2026. Hickerson goes in front of Judge Olivia Rosales, asking her to reduce those 2 felony convictions to misdemeanors and then expunge them entirely, to make his record, on paper, look like this history never happened at a felony level at all. He'd completed his probation requirements, according to his own filing. That part wasn't in dispute. The prosecution fought it anyway, and the judge sided with the prosecution, denied. I don't know exactly what was said in that hearing. I don't have the transcript. What I have is the outcome, confirmed by the DA's office to reporters. The motion failed for the second time in just over a year. 3 days later, August 16th, Hayden Panettiere was found unresponsive in an apartment in Greenville, South Carolina. Brian Hickerson and his brother Zach were both there. Paramedics worked on her. It didn't work. She was pronounced dead at 2:32 in the afternoon. She was 36 years old. I told you at the start I wasn't going to tell you that ruling caused her death, and I meant it. I still mean it. There is no confirmed connection between that hearing and whatever actually happened in that apartment 3 days later. The autopsy found no signs of trauma. Toxicology is still pending. The Greenville Police Department has said, on the record, there were no signs of foul play in their initial response. Hickerson has not been charged with anything related to her death. His attorney has asked, reasonably, that the investigation be allowed to run its course. But I don't think no confirmed connection means the timing doesn't matter. I think it means something different, something maybe more uncomfortable to sit with. That on the exact same week Hayden Panettiere died, the state of California had just, formally, one more time, looked at this man's history of violence against her and decided it was serious enough that it shouldn't be erased. The system, in a very specific, very narrow, very legal sense, knew enough, at least, to say no to cleaning up his record. 3 days before whatever happened in that apartment happened. I keep asking myself what it would have looked like if that hearing had gone the other way. If the judge had granted it. Would anything be different right now? Probably not, honestly. An expungement doesn't undo history. It just changes how a background check reads. It wouldn't have kept him out of that apartment. It wouldn't have changed whatever was or wasn't in that bag of medication police say he showed them. I don't think there's a version of this where a different ruling on August 13th saves her life 3 days later. I want to be honest about that, because I don't want to hand you a false sense of if only, when the actual mechanics of what happened next probably had nothing to do with a paperwork decision in an LA courtroom. But I still think it matters that we say this part out loud, clearly, on the record, because there's a very specific kind of erasure that happens after someone dies, especially someone famous, especially when the person who was with them has a documented history like this one. The relationship gets softened in retrospect. On again, off again becomes just her boyfriend. A felony conviction becomes past legal issues. People who weren't paying attention start seeing headlines that treat this like an ordinary tragic accident involving an ordinary couple, when the actual paper trail, Wyoming, the restraining order, the threatening texts, the 8-count case, the 2 felony convictions, 2 separate denied expungement attempts, tells a much more specific story about who was in that room with her when she died. I'm not saying that story explains her death. I want to be as clear as I possibly can about that, one more time, because this is exactly the kind of case where sloppy language causes real harm to real people who haven't been charged with anything. What I'm saying is that story exists. It's documented. It's public record, verified by court filings and confirmed by the DA's office. And it deserves to be part of how this is remembered, alongside whatever the toxicology results eventually show, alongside whatever the DEA's investigation eventually finds, alongside everything else that's still unresolved. There's a version of covering this case that just treats it as a drug story. Overdose, maybe, pending confirmation. Sad, but simple. A talented person who struggled with addiction for years, and it finally caught up with her. And there's a version that treats it as a story about power and violence, and a system that, even when it does exactly what it's supposed to do, even when a judge looks at a violent history and refuses to let it be scrubbed clean, still couldn't stop what happened 3 days later in an apartment 900 miles away from that courtroom. I think the truth probably involves pieces of both of those stories, tangled together in ways that a single ruling or a single toxicology report isn't going to fully untangle. Addiction and abuse aren't separate things that happen to separate kinds of people. They compound each other. They feed each other. Someone fighting to stay sober, staying in a relationship with a documented history of violence against her, is carrying two enormous weights at the same time. And I don't think it's an accident that both of those threads run straight through the final years of Hayden Panettiere's life. She wrote about this, not in some clinical, distant way. In her own memoir, published just months before she died, she described the abuse in that relationship directly. She wasn't hiding from it. She'd already told the world, in her own words back in 2020, that she wanted her story to help other people recognize the same patterns in their own lives and get out before it was too late. I think about that Instagram caption a lot, honestly. Written in 2020, talking about finding her courage back, getting her voice back, getting her life back. And then, 6 years later, back with the same man, in an apartment in South Carolina, on a trip nobody's fully explained yet. I don't have a neat conclusion for that. I don't think there is one. Abuse doesn't work in straight lines, and neither does recovery. And pretending otherwise would be simpler for a video script, but dishonest about how any of this actually functions for the people living through it. Here's where things stand today, as plainly as I can lay it out for you. Brian Hickerson's felony domestic violence convictions from 2021 remain on his record. The August 13th ruling kept them there, and as far as public record shows, they still stand. He has not been charged in connection with Hayden's death. Police have said there were no signs of foul play at the scene. An autopsy found no trauma. Toxicology results are still pending, and typically take weeks to come back. The DEA has assigned multiple agents to assist the local investigation, specifically to trace whether any drugs involved, if drugs turn out to be involved at all, were obtained or provided illegally. Her body has been released to her family, who are now handling funeral arrangements. None of that changes what happened on August 13th. A judge looked at his history and said, no, this doesn't get cleaned up. 3 days later, the woman that history belonged to was gone. I don't know what else there is to say about that, except that I think it deserves to be remembered exactly the way it happened. In order, with dates, without anyone rounding off the uncomfortable parts to make the story easier to tell. If you want to keep following this investigation as the real findings come in, the toxicology, whatever the DEA's involvement produces, anything actually confirmed by credentialed reporting instead of speculation, that's what this channel is for. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and we'll walk through it with you the moment there's something real to say.